Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins. Thank you for joining the show. I feel like I am like a game show host every time I'm doing that intro because I feel like I should be running down the aisle for The Price is Right and being like, yeah! I do appreciate you hanging out. And this week's guest who will be hanging out with us is Tanner Merritt. He is the vocalist, pretty sure guitarist. That's how professional of me, right? But I know he sings for the band Oh Brother, who are fucking awesome. Just released a new record. More on that in a minute. PropertyZach.com. Check it out. They do a lot of stuff. Talk about the newest records that come out and give you appropriate opinions on them. They also talk about the latest tours that come out. They also keep you informed in who signs to what record label. So if you need to be in the know, which I think you do because you're listening to this show, you should check out that website and become informed. PropertyofZach.com. You will not regret it. I promise. And while you're at it, business stuff, let's go to the website, 100wordspodcast.com. I am posting fun stuff for you to check out on your daily internet routines. You pop there, you watch a video, you listen to a song, you become more educated. That's what I hope you will walk away from. And also, if you're feeling ever so generous, go to the iTunes store, pop in there, write a few sentences, press submit, done. It's like 2.5 minutes out of your life, if that. If you're feeling a little bit nicer, you can drop some stars as well. I do really pay attention to those reviews, and the iTunes people have told me that the more reviews the show gets, the better it looks, the more reputable the show looks, and it just kind of helps out in general. So help me help you by giving some reviews. All right, 2 things to talk about, and then we'll talk about Tanner from Oh Brother. I just recently had the privilege of watching, I don't know if I'd call them indie rock, whatever, indie rock band, The National, who most of you are probably somewhat at least topically familiar with. They performed here in Los Angeles, California at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, which was, the show was incredible. And I don't even call it a show because it was an event. It's one of those things that, I mean, it's sold out in a matter of hours, I think. You know, you're just sitting on a lawn on this, you know, beautiful summer night, and there's palm trees in the background, and you're at a cemetery. Just like the vibe in and of itself is just incredible. And then on top of that, you have this amazing band such as The National playing songs at you. A friend of mine was going to watch them 3 times all in a row, because what they did is they played a venue, then they played the Hollywood Forever Cemetery show, and then they played a venue the following night. And they asked me, like, oh, are you going to any of the other nights? And I said, no, I'm not. And then I explained myself. I said, yeah, just because I've seen The National in a club environment, I don't need to duplicate or replicate that experience. I don't know. Maybe that's like an adult thing to do now, because I used to go to multiple nights of a tour if it came through. With the hope that the band would play different songs, or there would be some unique twist to it, or just the sheer quantity. Like, I need to see this band as much as possible. And that's become less important in my life. There's been times that I have just, gone to one date, and that's sufficient for me. I don't feel like I missed out because I didn't go to San Diego and also Santa Barbara and or any of the other dates that play in Southern California, because we definitely have an overabundance of entertainment when it comes to the live show variety. That's how I operate now, where it's like I look at a show or I look at some sort of thing that I'm going to do, and it needs to be something special or unique, or they're setting it up to be something that will, I guess, be memorable in some sense of the term, such as The National playing in a cemetery. Do you just go to one show that's in the area? Do you try to catch multiple dates? What is your show-going criteria? I mean, I know when you're 18 or 19 years old, you go to like 7 shows a week. If you could go to 7 shows a night, you probably would. Because I definitely was like that at one point. But then as you get older, you're like, well, maybe I can kind of pick and choose because I can fill this time with other stuff. So anyways, whatever, adult stuff. Second thing, one of my friends recently got embroiled in some misquoting press drama stuff, and it got me thinking, because basically he was asked to contribute for a piece for a certain magazine, and I'll keep this unspecific just because I don't need to draw any attention to the actual issue at hand. But basically, he was requested to fill out and speak to a writer about this one particular topic. That writer then basically, took that list and kind of, I wouldn't say turned it on its head, but basically misrepresented how he was going to present it. And it just got me thinking of the way that journalism works now, where you are so concerned with, click-throughs and making sure that you have unique page views and you got some traffic and you got some juice behind the story. And man, it's getting a lot of social networking buzz. And that's what everyone craves. That's obviously what this show craves. I would love it if these download numbers got up to hundreds of thousands of people checking it out because I had some band member or artist on the show that, broke down and cried and talked about his overdose or something. Like, that would be great just for the sheer download portion of it. But just that sort of, point and click culture where it's like it needs to be drama filled and juicy in order for us to want to really consume it. And I just ultimately felt bad for my friend because he was in the middle of this thing and it just like totally bummed him out. I tried to offer him some advice and just tell him to ignore it, but there's only so much that you can do when, a lot of other people on the internet start to make fun of said person at the center of the story. Yeah, it just kind of sucks because it also makes me think of the troll internet culture as well, of people that just like to pile on whatever thing is starting to get passed around the internet without actually thinking about, oh, this is an actual person, or maybe I don't have the whole story. That's a whole different rant in and of itself. But anyways, give me feedback, show going, press stuff, internet trolls. The email is 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Anyways, Tanner from Oh Brother, I got this idea to interview him from a person who, wrote the show and was like, hey, you should interview him and the band. Had seen the band, I think, twice before. Always enjoyed what they did. Never was over the moon about it, but really enjoyed certain aspects of their live show. And then hearing bits and pieces of this new record has got me really intrigued. And the guys in the band have always seemed to be one that other bands wanted to surround themselves with. And so we'll talk about that in the interview. But I was just really intrigued. And at the end of the conversation, I definitely converted to a full Oh Brother fan, if you will. And I will be purchasing their new record when it comes out, which is like any day now. So check that out. Anyways, here's my conversation with Tanner. I will talk to you after this. I first came across you guys with the first EP that you did. I think it was like, didn't Animal Style have an affiliation with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not at first, but when it came out on vinyl, it was a split release through Animal Sounds and Broken Circles.
That's right. Yeah. So I think that's where I first tripped on you guys.
Animal Style.
Yeah, no. Yeah. It's okay.
What is it? Animal Sounds.
Yeah, there you go. But so I tripped across you guys there, and then it was one of those things where, just talking about all of our mutual friends, you guys started to hit the touring circuit, and you struck me, and you guys have grown past this, but you've always struck me as like the band's band. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense of the term, but like you're the band that every band wants to tour with because you're good dudes. You play music that they actually like, as opposed to like, oh, okay, like we have to bring this band out because they're drawing like 500 kids a night or something like that. Did you get that feeling as you guys started to kind of get out there where it's just like this is flattering that these bands want to spend time with us?
Yeah, it's definitely been the case with us from the beginning. Most of the people that listen to our band are in bands. Therefore, it's hard to make a lucrative career out of it because every band dude is broke.
Right.
Yeah, early on, bigger bands like Thrice that would take us under their wing, and I guess just because they liked us, and that was awesome.
Yeah. There are some times where it's like, if that tag doesn't get shed, it's not even a tag. Because realistically, I don't think even like, kids that go to shows on a regular basis understand that, like the concept of like, oh, this band is going on tour with this band because they like them, like a lot of the times they don't understand like why these tours happen, but
right. Yeah.
There comes a certain time where it's like, if you become the perpetual band's band, where it's like, okay, like this band continually plays in front of large audiences and no one gets them. Like that's when it becomes obviously a bad thing.
Yeah, could very well be on that path.
Right. Well, no, I I mean, you guys have started to reach, in my opinion, in watching, because I've seen you guys a few times, and the most recent time was that circuit tour you guys did, and that definitely seemed to translate more into people like, oh yeah, like I get this, I get where they're coming from, because you guys aren't an immediate band, like in the sense of they may watch, yeah, you may see you guys live once, but then they would have to really kind of take the record in and kind of sit with it.
Even the records probably don't make sense for the first, I don't know, dozen listens.
Yeah. Is that like overall, is that a rewarding experience in the sense of like, do you feel people that kind of get you really get you, as opposed to just like, oh yeah, like, oh brother, they're kind of whatever, like they're okay?
Yeah, I think so. I think the people that like us, seem to, be really on board and, kind of receptive. I guess they have to be. So, that is rewarding. It seems like, I feel like we get like a more patient list, at least the people that stick with us. So that's good.
That's a good word. I like patient, because that's anytime I see bands out there and like you want to provoke a reaction, because it's like the bands that get quote unquote forgotten about, a year or two down the line, to the ones that are just kind of in the middle. They're very vanilla. Like it's easy to forget that they released 3 records because they all either sounded the same or they've got nothing beyond whatever is happening at that very moment. So I can see where that's helping you guys from that perspective. Born and raised, were you like always the Atlanta native, or where'd you come up, and what was your family structure like?
Well, I was born in Atlanta, lived in a small town outside of Atlanta for like the first 5 years of my life, and then my family moved to Alabama, where I lived for like until I came back when I was like 17. So a good 12 years.
What city in Alabama?
A few small towns, like Birmingham area.
Okay.
Like really small. Like for a while we lived in like a 1 traffic light town.
Wow. And so what did your mother and father do for a living, and do you have like brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have a younger brother and a younger sister. And my parents kind of moved around a lot. They worked with like different like sort of like ministry organizations that had to do with like children. For a long time they worked at a group home and took care of like delinquent children.
Oh, okay.
While we lived there.
Got it. Was that kind of the reason you guys moved around a lot, was because they were always involved in different communities and kind of needed to, move on from that perspective? Or was it just a matter of they just like to move?
That like they would go to different like homes, or like most of the time they were living there and taking care of 5 or 6 children at a time. They've always liked helping people. I mean, that was just kind of like a natural thing. I don't even remember how or when they got into it. I mean, my family has always been pretty religiously grounded. So I was definitely brought up,
for lack of a better term, probably
right,
like Christianity.
Definitely. I was brought up in churches and stuff like that, and they were always like aspects of ministry.
Okay.
I guess usually having to do with kids. So.
Were you heavily involved in like youth group and stuff like that?
Yeah. When I was younger, definitely.
So you spent most of your formative years, like you said, in kind of small towns in Alabama and stuff like that. I always find that so interesting, obviously, just because I never experienced that myself. I mean, I visited small towns like in Illinois and what have you, but never was raised in places like that. Was it a weird experience? Now that you're looking back on it, was it like, wow, that's was strange that I was living in such a small town, like, and I had no, you had nobody to really rely on, maybe except your brother or whatever. Like, do you look back on those times fondly?
It was really weird, especially with the person that I've become, which it probably had a lot to do with shaping who I've become. Like, I mean, I grew up in those situations, like, extremely religious, conservative. I mean, I had a thick Southern accent as a child. Like, it was just, my life now is completely different. I mean, fairly liberal, and it's just opposite of like what I grew up in. It was definitely strange, but I mean, it had everything to do, I think, with who I am today. If I had grown up with like an extremely like liberal upbringing, I might have rebelled and done the exact opposite. Who knows? Yeah.
Did your brother follow along the same lines as you, or is he?
Yeah.
Interesting. You guys both kind of, in a sense, rebelled.
I guess we're both pretty stubborn and individuals. My younger brother kind of does the same thing. He actually he works for Circa. He guitar techs for them now.
Oh, that's cool.
But he does it for several other bands as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we've always been close, and at a certain point, we just decided we didn't want to look like or sound like or act like anything that we had grown up around.
Sure. Well, because there definitely is a very distinct, Southern atmosphere. There's obviously the positive sides where it's like, everybody's friendly and, like you were talking about your parents being highly involved in the community and stuff like that. And then there's obviously the negative connotations where it's like, oh, people in the South must be stupid. And they're obviously, very, backwoods and that type of stuff. So when did you yourself kind of start to recognize that was not something you wanted to, I guess be a part of, for lack of a better term?
Probably around the middle of high school. Everyone's sort of like coming of age kind of period.
Mm-hmm.
I guess puberty can change a lot, even your mindset. But yeah, I don't know what sparked it. What was the realization that decided I wanted to change my entire lifestyle? But,
right.
It happened, which is funny because like now I love the South. I don't think I would want to really live anywhere else. I mean, there is a friendliness here, and I like how laid back the people are. But like at that point, I think I just wanted to get out and
sure
see other things.
When you were actually starting to go to high school in your formative years, what town were you in then, and like what size of the high school, and was it pretty small, or did it start to get a little larger?
Pretty small. Spent most of my high school in this place, Chelsea, Alabama, and I think my entire class might have been maybe 400 something people.
Oh wow,
maybe 500 people. Pretty small. I went there from 10th through my senior year, but I didn't finish my senior year. So after that, I moved back to Georgia and redid my senior year.
Just start over,
Yeah, I stopped going to school in my first senior year. And if you have so many unexcused absences, they automatically fail you regardless of your grade.
Yeah. They don't. Yeah. Usually once you stop showing up, like just because I've had so much experience with high school, because my wife is a high school English teacher, my mom's a high school English teacher. You have to deliberately try to not graduate high school. One of the ways of not trying is not showing up. So I get it.
Yeah, it was an interesting year. Even the days that I would go, I knew where the theater teacher left her keys to the auditorium, and I would unlock the auditorium and go in and take a nap for the first few classes. So you
would be on the school grounds, but you would not be attending your classes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So teachers would see you around school like, oh, there's Tanner. How come he hasn't been to my math class in like 3 weeks? That was you.
That's the way it worked.
Because you didn't want to arouse suspicion from your parents, even though they eventually would know.
Well, usually I would take my younger brother and younger sister to school so my parents wouldn't be suspicious.
Got it.
I would drop them off, maybe go to Waffle House, have a cup of coffee, show up to school an hour late, unlock the auditorium, take a 2-hour nap, and then hit school about 3rd or 4th class.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But basically, when it was convenient for you,
I really didn't care.
Right.
Basically, I knew what I wanted to do, and at that point, a grade ahead.
Okay.
So most of my life, I got put up a grade when I was in elementary school.
Was the fact that you were just like, hey, this guy is clearly advanced. He needs to be with older kids. That was kind of it.
Yeah, I think in the 3rd grade, they sent me to some like counselor or something, did some tests, and they started putting me in like grade ahead classes and kind of went up from there.
All you did was you just wanted to graduate with the kids that you were going to graduate with.
Yeah, that wasn't the conscious decision. No. It was more that I just didn't care.
Because of the traveling nature of obviously what your parents were doing and stuff like that. I don't know. It strikes me that your upbringing was a little bit, I guess bohemian in nature, in the sense of obviously not like Christian or religious background, but just kind of, your parents sound like they were easy-going. Were they, or were they not? Yeah,
super easygoing, super loving, friendly people.
Mm-hmm.
They are. They're amazing people. They're the kind of people that, if any of my friends were like having a hard time or a hard family situation, they were just like, well, come to our house and stay indefinitely.
Yeah, open up their doors.
Yeah, for anyone. Right.
That's cool. Sometimes people have a certain conception of how like a strict Christian household is, and sometimes the love is sucked right out of that because the love is being put everywhere else. And so,
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't have called my upbringing like strict or anything. It was just very, very like everything was based around Christianity.
sure, sure, sure. And so, yeah, as you started to navigate through high school, like you mentioned that you obviously knew what you had already wanted to do. What was it that started to tickle your fancy from that perspective?
Kind of always played music. Both of my parents played music. It was always around. My mom taught piano lessons on the side when I was like 5 or 6. I started learning a little piano then, getting to guitar when I was around 11. It's kind of all I've ever done and all I've ever wanted to do. I think that's why school kind of seemed like a joke after that, because
Right.
I just had no interest in it.
What instrument did your father play?
He played guitar.
Oh, okay. So did you guys have the sing-alongs after dinner? I just imagine like sitting in the living room being like, "Hey guys, let's play a song."
Yeah, sometimes informally. I mean, it was always one of those things. They never pressured me to play music. I guess they didn't want it to seem like a chore.
Sure.
So it was most of the time, like when I really got into it, it was like me in my bedroom, like just trying to figure things out. And if I had a question, like about something, like, "Hey Dad, how do you play this chord?" And he would show me, and then I'd run away again.
Right. You're like, "Thanks. I'm extracting
Yeah.
I'm extracting information from you. Thank you, Father."
Right. Yeah.
What was, just because you were so, I don't know, kind of culturally isolated, how did you even get introed to music in the first place? Besides, like, obviously your parents' records and stuff like that. When did you start to discover music on your own?
I wasn't really allowed to listen to a lot because, you know.
Of course. You had to go to Christian bookstores to buy your music, right?
Right. Pretty much. Yeah. Except for I could listen to Dad's music, so I could listen to like Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan and the Allman Brothers, but I couldn't listen to anything that was current.
Right, right.
Grew up on a lot of blues rock just because of him,
Okay.
because that was like the only music that was around that I could tolerate, I think.
Right.
I don't know, when I was like 14, I started, I would sneak like cassette tapes and record songs off the radio.
Oh, okay.
So I could listen to. Real rebellious then.
Right. Anybody that hasn't been brought up in a religious household, in the sense of like you get certain things, you know, kind of restricted from you just because that obviously isn't kosher from a religious perspective. A lot of people don't understand that concept, where it's just like, oh yeah, well, whatever, all this stuff is easily accessible to me. But you know, when you have to like jump through additional hoops, like what you're doing, like that's that's risky. Even recording something off the radio, like that sounds so pedestrian, but that's risky at the time.
I mean, this was the height of, you know, like Marilyn Manson shock rock.
Oh.
And so that was all that parents saw on Fox News about the rock music like world.
Right.
You know?
Right, yeah. My son is gonna get swallowed by Satan, and there we are.
Yeah. I would sneak and record like Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins songs when I could, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I would listen to over and over.
That's amazing. Did you ever have an embarrassing I got caught moment of music where you had to get your dub tapes destroyed or anything like that?
Definitely. I was probably around like 15 or 16 the first time like people introducing me in school to, I guess, like the whole like pop punk genre or whatever. And I went to a Walmart and somehow I was able to buy, even though you were supposed to be 18, I was able to buy NoFX The Decline.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah. And that was my first record that I had myself, I think, that was like, I guess, current secular music. I mean, other people had given me stuff, but yeah, and I would hide it in my bedroom, under my bed, I think. My mother was in there for something and found it and read the lyrics and cried.
Oh, no.
So,
that's heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking. And so they broke it and threw it away. The album's pretty lyrically fucked, though.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Looking back, I'm like, I can understand why she'd cry. Maybe.
Right. Well, I just always laugh because I have such distinct memories of me being like 11 and 12 years old. And this is like right when Dr. Dre's The Chronic came out and like Snoop Dogg came out. And of course, like, here I am, like a hard white boy from the suburbs thinking I'm like the most badass dude ever by listening to The Chronic. And like, talk about fucked up lyrics, like, holy shit. Like, but my mom didn't know any different. But if she like actually took 2 seconds to like read that, of course she'd be heartbroken. She's
right.
So
And I think there's something like when you become a parent, like maybe with them at least, there's no longer any differentiation between like music and lyrical content. Because even though I was listening to it, not really paying attention like to the lyrics, like current, you have like all these 13-year-old kids that'll like recite like filthy rap songs and stuff like that. But it's not really sinking in most of the time. It's just music,
right?
And like, my dad would listen to Hendrix, which is clearly drug rock.
Yeah.
But because he was into it before he had children, I think, is why it was acceptable.
There's obviously an innocence about it, where it's like you feel like it's so, it's just like so benign. Like, oh yeah, why is this, affecting? Where it's like, yeah, fast forward 40 years from now, and like obviously like, NWA and gangster rap and stuff like that. That's like the oldies that people will refer to, and it's like, oh yeah, like like fucking nigger, I shot him. Like that won't even be a thing. Yeah. It's like, what? That's crazy. But yeah, it's all the context. One other thing I wanted to bring up: Christian versus secular music. The thing that always blew my mind was when, like obviously like Tooth and Nail and that, Solid State, like that label became such a powerful juggernaut in the mid to late 90s. And like, you go to a Christian bookstore, and it blew my mind. Like, CDs are like $25. What are you doing?
Oh, yeah.
I honestly felt dirty buying music from there, because I'm like, you're charging like almost twice as much as what you would buy at like a Tower or Warehouse or something.
Outrageous.
Totally. I just remember being like, 15 or 16 years old, and it dawning on me where it's like, they are literally taking advantage of us. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But when that's the only place you're allowed to get your music, they can make a killing off of it.
Yeah, you can charge a premium for it.
Yeah.
And so as you started to, like obviously music became a part of your life and you knew you wanted to do that, when you kind of started to turn away from a lot of the stuff that you had been raised with, I presume that caused a lot of friction in the household. And like, how did you transition into that? And then obviously, how did your parents react to religion becoming, I guess, maybe a less important part of your life at that time? And then obviously dropping out of high school and all that type of stuff?
My parents are pretty understanding, so I wouldn't say it caused that much friction. And it was something that we just generally never talked about.
Okay.
Even though, like, that was kind of like the silent understanding, maybe, of pig-headed teenager that I was, I like, out of respect for them, am not going to challenge their beliefs. Believe that they have, just as much of a right to theirs as I have to mine. So I wouldn't say it caused that much friction. My first senior year situation, I eventually came to my parents, and there was a family crisis going on, and I think that problem took precedent over what was going on in my life. So my parents just kind of like understood it maybe as me like coping, I guess. That year, my grandfather, my mom's father, within that school year was diagnosed with brain cancer and passed away from brain cancer.
Very short period of time.
Right. It spread very quickly. There was a lot of things going on then, because my grandparents still lived in Georgia, so my family was going back and forth like on the weekends, and just a lot of turmoil amidst the family. So I think there was an understanding with that. And then I repeated, when we moved back to Georgia after he passed away, I, finished high school and graduated and all that stuff just to make everyone happy.
Right. just to do your civic duty as a responsible son.
Right. Yeah.
Did you play in a band in high school or anything like that? When did like the idea of like, I want to form a band become part of your life?
My senior year, the final senior year, I didn't really know many people for the first part of it.
Right.
I was just trying to get this school thing finished in a new place. But I met a bunch of people, like, I guess sort of closer to the last half of my senior year, who after school started, we formed a band. Explosions in the Sky kind of rip-off band. maybe a little more mathy.
Pretty mature for a senior in high school to have, because I'm trying to get a sense of who you were in high school as far as like, were you like, were you a punk kid, were you a hardcore kid, or did you, kind of fit in with anything from that perspective?
I didn't know. I still don't know.
I think that could reflect Oh Brothers music. I can understand.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of all over the place. By that point, I had become, a Radiohead fanatic. Then I got into a lot of bands. Like,
okay.
At that period of time, it was always kind of changing. Like at one point, I thought I liked like lo-fi indie folk rock, like Neutral Milk Hotel and Bright Eyes and stuff like that. And I would try to do that. That was before high school ended. I was trying to do that by myself, like in my bedroom or making little recordings and whatnot. And then I got into like Mogwai and Explosions in the Sky and Godspeed You Black Emperor, I think, towards the end of my senior year. And then that was all I wanted to do. So I kind of, just changed my mind a lot. And
you were trying to find what felt the most comfortable for, I guess, a longer period of time.
Yeah.
I still believe that that's a pretty mature decision to try to be in a band like in your senior year of high school that has those sort of sonic ambitions. I look at myself, I'm like, I might want to accomplish those things now that I'm 32 years old, but like when I'm 18, I can't wrap my head around that. I'm just, creating crappy, hardcore or whatever.
Right.
So
it was funny because, I mean, every weekend in our town, there was like a hardcore show at the VFW. And we would try to hop on, but it was all like hardcore and pop punk bands. And so it didn't go over well. I mean, kids would go from, beating each other up while watching bands to, we're playing. And then everyone would walk outside. But there was this like local coffee shop that I made friends with the owner. And I started like booking shows there and trying to bring in bands, like regional bands that I liked. And it actually, started growing, and we would play there. And I think people liked, the more chill environment for that.
Oh, so you started to be able to put different sort of shows on and obviously expose people that just kind of went to that club just because that was the thing to do in town.
Yeah, right.
That's cool.
So I went to, the owner of that coffee shop, and I was like, hey, can I book shows here? And I had no idea what I was doing. And at that point, it was just like, looking on MySpace or Pure Volume to find any bands in like Georgia or South Carolina or Tennessee I thought sounded cool that would be willing to drive and play a show in Noonan, and then I would always put my band on the bill.
Yeah, well, that's like the perfect strategy. You're like, hey, I'll book the shows, and hey, I have a band too.
Right.
What was the band's name that you were creating stuff under at that time?
Willow. Yeah.
Okay, that's not bad at all. I'm always intrigued by people's first bands just because I feel like that just tells so much about a person's musical experience. So, but you're lucky. That's not a bad band name. I mean, I've heard worse. There's definitely worse stories.
Yeah,
I've heard it.
Yeah.
But so yeah, and Willow is definitely appropriate for the music, the sonics you were trying to create with that.
Right.
And so, and then all during this time, I mean, I presume you had no ambitions to obviously further your education. Were you basically just like, okay, I want to try to get together a band and play some shows and just kind of, see where that takes me?
Definitely. Yeah. I had absolutely no schooling ambition. I mean, it took everything I had just to, suck it up and finish it in high school.
Right.
So,
I mean, from the way that you're describing your musical upbringing, I presume you didn't have these ideas of like, I am looking forward to becoming a rock star, or was that kind of like, oh no, I want to be in a really, really successful band, or like, how did your vision match up with that?
Well, I never really had much of a long-term vision or a business plan,
right.
Which I think
sure.
The case with most irresponsible young men. But my dream then, and still, I mean, is to just make a moderate living doing something I really enjoy to do.
That's your sustainable goal, where it's like, okay, I do like that you use the word moderate, because I think it's like people definitely set up certain levels of success. Like, I can speak for myself when it's like, after Taken we broke up in like 2004. I started another band that played from like 2006 till about, 2010-ish or so. We were called Makoto. We put out like, we put out an EP and a full length, but the way that I went in mentally to that band was definitely way more kind of, for lack of a better term, business minded in the fact, because it's like, Taken was exactly how you're describing it, where it's like, oh, whatever, it's a band, like,
Right.
I want to do this, but I don't have any, like, this is what I'll be doing when I'm like 40. There was definitely more of the conscious business thought put into, the second band. And I think honestly, because of that, certain aspects of like my enjoyment of that definitely suffered, because I didn't feel like it was as, I don't know, like capturing a lot of that sort of youthful energy in a bottle that, just happens because, you don't have those ambitions, But I think it's like, it's all what your expectations are going into it.
Right. I feel like with Oh Brother, like recent, like in the past couple of years, I think we're getting to the point where we can split that. Because like you said, like when Oh Brother started doing stuff, we kind of, eventually have to adapt more of a business mindset. And
of course,
yeah, we began to do that, and a lot. I mean, the majority of it is drummer Michael. He is the business guy. He's incredible at it. Whereas I would be a complete failure if I had to do our taxes or something.
yeah. Right. Don't put something practical in front of me.
Yeah.
Just go ahead. Yeah. Just you take care of that. That's fine. But I mean, that's good, because you always have your one or two people in the band that are sort of that creative business drive, because that takes just as much creative energy as it does to write a song, because you just need to make sure that shit's taken care of.
Definitely, and he's like one of the most highly motivated people I've ever met. Which my motivation comes entirely in spurts. And you can't really do that when something like business aspects are relying on you.
No, totally. Dude,
yeah.
I'll get to this bill in like 6 months. That's all.
Yeah.
I promise.
Yeah. I don't feel like answering emails this week.
Perfect. Well, but I think that reflects, that reflects you as a person. And I think that would be, if you were trying to do that for yourself, like you would hate it and you wouldn't enjoy playing in a band because you had all this crap hanging around you.
I still think in the long run, it would be worth it. For a time. I mean, if it would make sense. I think it's just such a huge part of me that I would kind of do anything to try to make it work. But I feel like the situation that we have right now is working out really well.
Well, and it sounds like you were saying, the expectations that you guys have are, I guess, in check and aligned with, because a lot of the times I feel it's like once a band starts to get any sort of attention or hype or whatever you want to call it, it's like sometimes it's really easy to kind of put the cart in front of the horse and be like, dude, we should be big, whatever that means.
Yeah,
and then
that means.
Right. And then sometimes it's like your hopes and dreams come crashing down, and then you're left with just like this, this completely hollow shell of a band, and like it doesn't, that's obviously not sustainable, but like it sounds like you guys have already kind of, sussed that out and figured out the level that you're comfortable at.
Right. Well, and with any situation, I think you have to come to an acceptance of the fact that it's kind of like a sliding scale. No matter what like level of success you reach, you're never going to view yourself as there. Really, at least with like a current rock band. It's hard to think of any new bands that I would think that they just like, oh yeah, we're here, we've arrived,
Right. Sure.
For a long time, at least, the more you get, the farther you want to see yourself go, which I think that sort of like is what drives a lot of people, especially me. I think it's maybe where I get ambition. If I am ambitious, I don't know.
I understand where you're coming from. And I think it's interesting too, just because, as we were mentioning earlier, variety of tour partners that you guys have had, everybody from, Thrice to Circa to Alice in Chains, and, playing Lollapalooza. Because you guys have played to such diverse audiences, have you personally noticed yourself which ones that either A, you feel comfortable in, or B, seem to react the best to what you guys are doing? Been able to pick up on that at all?
The Thrice and Circuit tours, I think, were probably the best for us as far as like fan growth. I feel like both of those bands have like a really open-minded audience, and those people are still malleable in a sense. Whereas like with Alice in Chains, I mean, a band that started in 1987, I think the year I was born. Like a lot of those people are just there to see Alice in Chains. they've been their favorite band for like 20 years, you know? And, whereas like, I mean, we'll see some response. Like, I feel like those type tours are, gain more from the press coverage, I think,
Sure.
than the actual shows. Like, people seeing your name associated with Alice in Chains, I guess, just looks good. It's definitely more comfortable touring with bands like Thrice and Circa. Like, you're more likely to hang out with kids after it because it's not completely weird. It's not some like really drunk dad with like 3 kids, like awkward conversation at Alice in Chains.
The context in which they're being brought into that's a concert as opposed to a show. And like, that's a whole different ball of wax.
Definitely.
So and it's funny because then obviously once you break that barrier of like, hey, I'm Tanner from Oh Brother. And they're just like, what? You're not supposed to talk to me.
Right.
Like it's a whole different, they don't know how to react to that.
Yeah. It's a little strange. Those shows were by far the biggest like tour style shows that we've ever done, and we definitely felt like chumps. We load in, all of our gear is falling apart like ragtag, and we don't have a crew or anyone really. It's just the 5 of us. We do everything ourselves, and they have like I would notice someone different from their crew every day. Like, yeah, there are people like that I haven't seen you before, and you've been here the whole time. Like, yeah, it's just a different world, and they have like a wall of dummy cabs behind our like shitty backline gear. Just a completely different world that we had never been in. So
sure. It's not necessarily bad, it's different, and in turn, being so different makes you feel, like you said, like I like the word chumps, where it's just like, oh yeah, what are we doing here? Yeah, it was intimidating. But I mean, the band themselves, like the dudes in Alice in Chains, made us feel like really, they were super accommodating. They were really nice to us. And, I mean, that's they good. Didn't care, even though we felt like we looked like stupid. I'm not sure. Well, that's awesome. I used to work at Century Media Records doing like A&R and stuff like that, and like hearing what you guys do, like you're kind of like a metal band, and I don't mean that in a bad way, like metal in the sense of like Baroness, ISIS, like that type of stuff. There's a lot of elements to what you guys do that are akin to that. Right. Did labels ever like that, like from either Century Media or Relapse or that type of stuff? Was that ever a part of your world in the sense of you're like, oh, maybe we should talk to them to kind of release records before Triple Crown was even a thing, or was that never even an option for you guys? No, we never talked to anyone like that. I think we like being a heavy band is something that just kind of adapted for us over time. So like maybe we were like in denial, like when the term metal first started getting thrown around in conjunction with our name, I was like, what, metal? No way. But the fact that, bands like Baroness and ISIS exist and that we've gotten into those bands and stuff over the years, I definitely see it a lot now. But I just kind of thought we were, in the beginning, I mean, we would have just labeled ourselves as like, a melodic indie band who liked to play with their guitar amps too loud, Yeah. Triple Crown is a very diverse roster, and that's kind of like their thing. I mean, especially when you guys put out Garden Window, where it's like I first listened to that, and I was just like, dude, like this totally makes sense to be a part of that world. And like, because it's on, because a person may have preconceived notions about what Triple Crown puts out, they might not even obviously give you guys the time of day based on that. And this is mostly from a music critic standpoint, because obviously kids don't give a shit about what label whatever comes out on. I was wondering if you guys ran across that, where it's like you did see, certain fans bleed over from that, genre, because they were like, oh yeah, like I like those bands, so Oh Brother falls into that. Yeah, I think I would like to like sort of tether that sort of alliance there. I mean, I would like to be associated with those bands now. Sure. It's just something we didn't think of early on. Like our first EP we put out through Favorite Gentleman, which is a record label owned by our friends in Manchester Orchestra. And like a lot of the opportunities we got were like through that. Like our first tour with Thrice was on Thrice and Manchester's co-headlining tour. And then that's
through them, that's how everything, all the other tours we got. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how everything else happened for you guys, was because of that byproduct. It's really cool when a band can trace that back. This was either the definitive tour, the definitive release, the definitive song, where it's like, from that point on, like a corner was turned, Yeah. Like, it's cool that you can point to that specific moment and be like, oh yeah, stuff changed after that happened.
Right. I mean, it definitely comes down to, Manchester liking us and befriending us. A lot of the opportunities we got came from that, which